A father sat with his son in the warm glow of the evening sun, a nostalgic look on his face. "Son," he began, his voice steady yet tinged with emotion, "you've worked hard, and today you graduate with honors. To mark this achievement, I want to give you something special." From his pocket, he pulled out an old key and handed it to his son. The son looked at him, puzzled. "This," the father continued, pointing to the garage, "is the key to a Volkswagen Beetle I bought over 50 years ago. It's been sitting there, waiting for this day." The son followed his father to the garage, his curiosity piqued. As the doors creaked open, he saw the car, a dusty, aging vehicle that had clearly seen better days. "Before I hand it over to you," the father said, "I want you to do something. Take this car to the dealership downtown and ask them how much they'll offer for it." The son, though skeptical, nodded and took the key. With a mix of apprehension and excitement, he set out to see what the car was worth. At the dealership, the son parked the car in front of a sleek showroom filled with shiny, modern vehicles. The contrast was stark. A salesman approached, raising an eyebrow at the Beetle. "What are you looking to do with this old thing?" he asked, smirking slightly. "I'm just curious about its value," the son replied. After a brief inspection, the salesman shrugged. "We could offer you $10,000 for it, tops. It's pretty used up and doesn't hold much appeal." Disheartened, the son returned home to share the news with his father. When the son relayed the dealership's offer, his father nodded, unfazed. "All right," the father said, "now I want you to take it to a pawn shop. See what they say." The son frowned, unsure why his father was so insistent on these errands. Nonetheless, he complied, taking the Beetle to a small pawn shop on the edge of town. The pawn shop was cramped and dimly lit, filled with items of questionable origin. The pawnbroker gave the car a cursory glance and said bluntly, "I'll give you $1,000 for it, but that's being generous. It's too old and not in demand." The son, now feeling even more frustrated, drove back to his father, ready to voice his disappointment. "Only $1,000, the son reported, throwing his hands up. "What's the point of all this?" The father, still calm, said, "There's one more place I want you to take it. Go to the Classic Car Club and show it there." The son, though weary of this task, noticed the determination in his father's eyes and decided to follow through. The Classic Car Club was a completely different world. As the son drove into the venue, he was surrounded by gleaming vintage cars and enthusiasts who clearly cherished history on wheels. Almost immediately, a crowd formed around the Beetle, their eyes lighting up with admiration. One man stepped forward, inspecting the car closely. "This is incredible," he exclaimed. "It's a rare model, and in its original state too. We don't see these often." Another enthusiast chimed in, "I'd pay $100,000 for it without hesitation." Offers poured in as more people recognized the Beetle's unique value. The son was overwhelmed. When the son returned home and shared the news, his father smiled knowingly. "Now you see," he said, "the same car that was worth $10,000 at the dealership and $1,000 at the pawn shop is suddenly valued at $100,000 by the right audience. The difference lies in the perception of its worth." The son sat in silence, digesting his father's words. "I wanted you to learn an important lesson today," the father continued. "Value is subjective, and it depends on the environment you're in. The dealership couldn't see beyond its practicality. The pawn shop only looked at it as an outdated relic. But the car club? They understood its true significance." The father leaned back in his chair, his tone becoming more reflective. "This lesson isn't just about the car," he explained. "It's about you. In life, there will be people who underestimate you, who fail to see your true potential. That doesn't mean you're not valuable. It just means you're in the wrong place." The son nodded slowly, beginning to grasp the depth of his father's message. "So, you're saying I should always seek out the right places and people who appreciate me?" he asked. The father smiled. Exactly. Those who truly understand your worth will make you feel valued. But remember, their recognition doesn't define you, you define your own value. As the days passed, the son couldn't stop thinking about the Beetle and the reactions it had elicited. He began to see parallels between the car's journey and his own experiences. He recalled moments when he'd felt undervalued, times when his efforts went unnoticed, and how different it felt when someone genuinely appreciated his abilities. One evening, the father and son sat together, reminiscing about their lives. You know, the father said, when I bought that car, people thought I was foolish for spending my money on something so modest. But I saw potential in it, just as I see potential in you. The son felt a newfound sense of pride and responsibility. The father encouraged his son to start exploring his passions and dreams without the fear of judgment. Don't let others dictate your path, he advised. Find your purpose, and the right people will come along to support you. The son felt a surge of motivation, ready to embark on his own journey of self-discovery. Meanwhile, the Beetle became a symbol of inspiration in their household. Every time the son looked at it, he was reminded of his father's wisdom and the importance of self-worth. Friends and neighbors who visited often asked about the car, giving the father an opportunity to share the story and its profound lesson. The son began applying his father's lesson to various aspects of his life. At work, he stopped seeking approval from colleagues who didn't value his contributions. Instead, he focused on honing his skills and connecting with those who genuinely appreciated his efforts. Outside of work, the son found joy in activities that resonated with his passions. He joined communities where his talents were celebrated and where he could learn from others. The encouragement he received from these groups boosted his confidence and reignited his ambition. As the years went by, the father and son continued to share stories and lessons. The Beetle, now restored to its former glory, stood proudly in their driveway, a testament to the enduring power of self-worth and finding the right place. The son often marveled at how a simple car had taught him one of life's most valuable lessons. But the journey wasn't over. The father had more wisdom to impart, and the son had more lessons to learn. Life, after all, is a continuous process of discovering one's value and sharing it with the world. Together, they looked forward to the adventures that lay ahead, the Beetle always a reminder of where they'd started. Months later, the father fell ill. His once robust frame seemed to weaken with each passing day. The son noticed his father coughing more often and losing weight. Concerned, he insisted on a hospital visit, where the diagnosis left them both reeling. The father had late-stage lung cancer. The son was devastated but tried to hide his pain, focusing instead on ensuring his father received the best care possible. The Beetle, now gleaming after a meticulous restoration, became a source of comfort for the father, who often asked to sit by the window where he could see it parked. The son threw himself into taking care of his father, managing hospital visits and medications while juggling his job. Every night, they sat together, the father recounting stories of his youth and the dreams he had once harbored. The Beetle frequently came up in their conversations. That car, the father said one evening, isn't just a vehicle. It's a piece of me, a reminder of every struggle I overcame to give you a better life. The son listened intently, his heart heavy with the weight of his father's fading strength. As the weeks passed, the father's condition worsened. Despite the pain, he maintained his wisdom and humor, often consoling his son instead of the other way around. Don't let tragedy define you, he said one day, gripping his son's hand. This is life, and it's full of moments like these. But there's beauty in the pain if you look closely enough. The son nodded, fighting back tears, determined to make the most of the time they had left. One morning, as the father struggled to get out of bed, he asked his son for a favor. Take me for a drive in the Beetle, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The son hesitated, worried about his father's fragile state, but he couldn't refuse the request. Gently, he helped his father into the passenger seat and started the car. The familiar hum of the engine seemed to breathe life into the old man, who smiled for the first time in days. They drove through the countryside, the father pointing out landmarks and recounting memories tied to each one. The son listened, savoring every word, knowing these moments were fleeting. At one point, they stopped at a small lake where the father used to fish in his youth. "This was where I brought your mother on our first date," he said, his eyes misty. The son felt a lump in his throat, realizing how deeply intertwined his father's life and the beetle were. As they headed home, the father fell silent, his breathing labored. The son glanced over, panic rising in his chest. "Dad, are you okay?" he asked, pulling over to the side of the road. The father managed a faint smile. "I'm fine," he whispered. "Just tired." The son quickly drove them back to the house, vowing to never take his father's health for granted again. That night, as his father slept, the son stayed awake, thinking about all the lessons he had learned and the legacy his father was leaving behind. The next day, the son decided to share the story of the beetle and its significance with the local community. He organized a small gathering at the Classic Car Club, inviting enthusiasts and friends who had known his father. The event was a resounding success, with attendees marveling at the car and sharing their own stories of family and perseverance. The father, too weak to attend, watched a live stream from home, his face lighting up as he saw how much his story resonated with others. But tragedy struck unexpectedly. On the way back from the event, the son was involved in a car accident. Though he escaped with minor injuries, the beetle was severely damaged. When he returned home and told his father, he expected anger or disappointment. Instead, the father reached out to him, his hand trembling. "It's just a car," he said softly. "What matters is that you're safe." The son broke down, overwhelmed by guilt and relief, vowing to repair the car no matter how long it took. The father's health deteriorated rapidly after the accident. The son spent every waking moment by his side, their conversations filled with memories, laughter, and sometimes tears. One night, the father handed his son a small notebook. "This is for you," he said. Inside were handwritten notes, detailing the lessons he had tried to impart over the years. At the very end was a simple message: your value isn't tied to what you own, but to who you are and the love you give. The father passed away peacefully a few days later, surrounded by family. The house felt unbearably quiet in his absence, but the son found solace in the notebook and the restored beetle, which he now saw as a living testament to his father's wisdom and love. Determined to honor his father's legacy, he began sharing their story with others, spreading the message of self-worth and resilience. Months after the father's passing, the son took the beetle on a road trip, visiting all the places his father had loved. At each stop, he left a small token, a note, a flower, or a photograph, as a tribute. The journey was bittersweet, filled with moments of both grief and gratitude. Along the way, he met people who were touched by his story, many of whom shared their own tales of loss and love. One day, while parked at a small diner, an elderly man approached the son, admiring the beetle. "This car has a story, doesn't it?" he asked. The son nodded, sharing the tale of his father and the lessons he had learned. The man listened intently, then said, "Your father was a wise man. You're lucky to have had someone who saw your worth so clearly." The son felt a deep sense of pride and connection, knowing his father's legacy lived on through these moments. The son eventually began writing a book about his father, the beetle, and the life lessons they had shared. As he wrote, he found himself healing, the process allowing him to reflect on their bond and the strength it had given him. The book, titled The Value of a Beetle, became a heartfelt tribute to his father's wisdom and an inspiration to others. As the book gained popularity, the son was invited to speak at events and schools, sharing his father's philosophy with a wider audience. Each time he spoke, he brought the beetle with him, its presence a powerful visual reminder of the story's message. People were moved by the tale, many leaving the events with a renewed sense of their own worth. But not everyone appreciated the son's efforts. A group of critics accused him of exploiting his father's memory for personal gain. The son was deeply hurt by the accusations but remembered his father's words, "Don't stay in places where they don't recognize your value." He chose to focus on those who found meaning in his work, refusing to let negativity overshadow his mission. The son also faced financial struggles, as the cost of repairing and maintaining the Beetle had drained his savings. Yet, he couldn't bring himself to sell the car, even when offers poured in from collectors. "This car isn't for sale," he would say firmly. "It's part of who I am." His unwavering resolve inspired many, earning him respect and admiration. Despite the challenges, the son found joy in the simple act of driving the Beetle, feeling his father's presence in every turn of the wheel. He began hosting annual events at the Classic Car Club, where people gathered to celebrate their own stories of resilience and self-worth. The gatherings became a cherished tradition, drawing attendees from all walks of life. Years later, the son found an old cassette tape in the Beetle's glove compartment. Playing it, he heard his father's voice, recorded decades ago. "To whoever finds this," the tape began, "remember that every journey, no matter how bumpy, is worth taking if you know your destination." The son wept as he listened, the words a final gift from his father. The discovery of the tape reinvigorated the son's efforts to share his father's message. He created a foundation in his father's name, dedicated to helping people find their purpose and value. The foundation funded scholarships, community programs, and workshops, impacting countless lives. The son, now an older man himself, often sat by the Beetle, reflecting on his journey. Though tragedy had marked his path, it had also shaped him into someone his father would be proud of. And as he turned the key in the Beetle's ignition, he felt his father's spirit beside him, guiding him forward, always. Years passed, and the son, now in his late 40s, became a father himself. He named his daughter after his late mother, wanting to preserve the memory of the family's legacy. One rainy afternoon, he sat her in the passenger seat of the Beetle, just as his father had done with him. As they drove through the city, he shared the story of the car and the lessons it carried. His daughter listened with wide-eyed wonder, clutching her father's hand. "Grandpa must have been amazing," she whispered. The son nodded, tears welling up as he whispered, "He truly was." But tragedy struck when his daughter, only 8 years old, was diagnosed with a rare heart condition. The news shattered the son's world, dredging up the pain of losing his father and reigniting his fear of losing those he loved most. He spent countless nights by her hospital bed, holding her small hand and telling her stories of resilience and hope. The Beetle became her favorite subject, and she often asked to hear about its adventures. One day, she said weakly, "I'll drive it too." The son forced a smile, praying with every fiber of his being that her words would come true. Medical bills began piling up, and the son found himself at a crossroads. Though he had sworn never to sell the Beetle, he realized it might be the only way to afford the treatment his daughter desperately needed. One evening, he sat in the garage, staring at the car as memories flooded back. He heard his father's voice in his mind, reminding him that value wasn't tied to possessions but to love and sacrifice. "I'll do anything for her," the son whispered, tears streaming down his face. The next morning, he listed the Beetle for auction, setting a reserve price that would cover the medical expenses. The decision felt like a betrayal of his father's legacy, but he reminded himself that his father would have done the same for him. Offers poured in, some exceeding his expectations. Yet, as the final bid closed at $200,000, the son felt no relief, only an aching emptiness. He signed the papers and handed over the keys, watching as the car was towed away. "Goodbye, old friend," he murmured, his heart breaking. With the money from the sale, the son secured the best medical care for his daughter. The treatments were grueling, but she showed remarkable strength, her spirit unyielding. Each time she endured a difficult procedure, she would ask, "Did Grandpa's car help me today?" And each time, the son would reply, "Yes, sweetheart." Grandpa's car is making you stronger. The connection to the Beetle became her source of hope, even though it was no longer theirs. Months turned into years, and against all odds, his daughter's condition improved. The doctors called it a miracle, but the son knew it was the result of love, sacrifice, and a little piece of his father's legacy. One sunny day, he took her to the classic car club where the Beetle had once been celebrated. As they walked among the rows of vintage cars, she squeezed his hand and said, "I think Grandpa would be proud of us." The son nodded, overwhelmed by the bittersweet truth of her words. But life's tragedies are rarely spaced far apart. One evening, while the son was preparing dinner, he received a phone call that brought him to his knees. The storage facility where the Beetle was being kept had caught fire, destroying the car entirely. He felt a wave of despair crash over him, as if he had lost his father all over again. The car had been his last tangible link to the man who had shaped his life, and now it was gone. Unable to contain his grief, the son drove to the facility, standing before the charred remains of the Beetle. Ashes and twisted metal were all that remained of a car that had meant the world to him. In the silence, he heard his father's words once more, "It's just a car. What matters is who you are." Though the words brought some comfort, they couldn't fill the void left by the loss. The son knelt in the rubble, clutching a small piece of the Beetle's emblem that had survived the flames. When he returned home, his daughter hugged him tightly. "It's okay, Daddy," she said. "Grandpa's car did what it was supposed to do. It saved me." Her innocent words broke through his sorrow, reminding him of the deeper truth his father had always taught: value lies in love, not things. He held her close, realizing that while the Beetle was gone, its story and legacy would live on in their hearts. Determined to honor the car's memory, the son began building a wooden replica of the Beetle with his daughter. They worked on it together every weekend, sharing laughs and stories as they shaped each piece. Though it was far from perfect, the project brought them closer, allowing the son to pass on his father's lessons to the next generation. "This isn't just a car," he told her one day. "It's a symbol of everything Grandpa believed in." Years later, the replica stood proudly in their yard, painted in the same color as the original Beetle. It became a neighborhood attraction, drawing visitors who were curious about its story. The son and his daughter would sit nearby, sharing the tale of the car, the lessons it had taught, and the sacrifices it had inspired. Though the tragedy of losing the original Beetle still lingered, they found healing in keeping its memory alive. One day, while cleaning out the garage, the son discovered an old envelope tucked away in a forgotten drawer. Inside was a handwritten letter from his father, dated years before his passing. "If you're reading this," it began, "it means the car has left your hands, but its story remains in your heart. Remember, it was never about the car. It was about the love it carried." The son wept as he read the letter, feeling his father's presence more strongly than ever. The letter reignited the son's resolve to share his father's wisdom with the world. He began traveling to schools, community centers, and car shows, telling the story of the Beetle and the lessons it embodied. At each event, he brought a small piece of the original car's emblem, a tangible reminder of the value of resilience and love. People were moved, many leaving with a renewed sense of their own worth. As his daughter grew older, she continued the tradition, accompanying her father on his speaking engagements. She had inherited his passion for storytelling and often added her own perspective, sharing how the Beetle had saved her life. Together, they became a beacon of hope for others, their bond strengthened by the trials they had endured. But tragedy struck again when the son was diagnosed with a debilitating illness. The once vibrant man who had carried his father's legacy was now bedridden, his body betraying him in ways he couldn't control. His daughter, now a young woman, took on the role of caretaker, mirroring the love and devotion her father had once shown her. One evening, as she sat by his bedside, he handed her the piece of the Beetle's emblem. "This is yours now," he said weakly. "Keep it safe, and keep telling the story. It's not about me, or Grandpa, or even the car. It's about the love that connects us all." She nodded, tears streaming down her face, promising to honor his wishes. The son passed away a few weeks later, leaving behind a legacy that would endure for generations. At his memorial, his daughter shared the story of the Beetle with a crowd of friends, family, and strangers who had been touched by his journey. The wooden replica stood nearby, a testament to the love and resilience that had defined their lives. Years later, the daughter continued her father's work, traveling the world and sharing the lessons she had learned. She kept the piece of the Beetle's emblem with her always, a small but powerful reminder of the values her family had instilled in her. One day, while visiting a classic car show, she stumbled upon a car that looked remarkably like the original Beetle. The owner, an elderly man, told her he had restored it after purchasing it at an auction. When she explained its significance, he was deeply moved and offered to let her drive it. As she sat behind the wheel, she felt her father and grandfather's spirits beside her, guiding her forward. Though life had dealt her many tragedies, the daughter found strength in the lessons her family had passed down. And as she drove the Beetle through the city, she knew that the story was far from over, because love, like the car's enduring legacy, never truly ends. Driving the restored Beetle felt surreal to her. It was as if she was cradling a piece of her family's soul. The streets blurred with memories, her father teaching her the values of resilience, her grandfather's wise words echoing in her heart. But with every mile, she was reminded that life didn't allow for pauses. As much as she cherished this fleeting connection to her family's legacy, her purpose now was to move forward, to honor the sacrifices made by those who came before her. Tears streamed down her face, a mix of sorrow, gratitude, and newfound resolve. That evening, she sat by the window of her small apartment, staring at the piece of the Beetle's emblem she still carried. The city lights flickered in the distance, a reminder of life's constant motion. Her phone buzzed, a message from a struggling single mother she had met during one of her motivational talks. The woman shared how the Beetle's story had inspired her to leave an abusive relationship and start a new life. The daughter realized that the legacy of the Beetle wasn't just hers, it was a beacon of hope for many. Encouraged by the impact of her family's story, she decided to take a bold step. She launched an initiative called the Value Project, a program aimed at helping people recognize their worth. Using the Beetle's journey as a metaphor, she hosted workshops, spoke at schools, and partnered with organizations to empower those who felt undervalued. Each session ended with her holding up the emblem, telling attendees, "This small piece reminds me every day that even in ashes, there's meaning." Her words often brought tears to those who listened. But as her work gained momentum, tragedy struck once more. A trusted team member betrayed her, stealing funds from the initiative and leaving her organization in financial ruin. The betrayal cut deeply, not just because of the money, but because it mirrored the pain of losing trust in someone she considered family. For days, she questioned her ability to continue. "Maybe I'm not strong enough," she whispered into the quiet of her apartment. Yet, in her heart, she felt her father's steady voice, "Your value isn't defined by setbacks, but by how you rise from them." Determined not to let the betrayal define her work, she began rebuilding. She sold her car, downgraded her living situation, and worked tirelessly to restore the Value Project. The community rallied behind her, inspired by her resilience. Donations poured in, some accompanied by heartfelt notes. One read, "You taught me to see my worth when I couldn't. Now, let me help you see yours." These small acts of kindness reminded her that for every betrayal, there were countless acts of love waiting to lift her up. One day, while cleaning her desk, she found an old journal belonging to her father. Flipping through its pages, she discovered notes he had written about his dreams for the Beetle's legacy. He had imagined it becoming a symbol for people to find strength in their own stories. Her eyes welled up as she read his words, "Our value isn't in what we own, but in how we touch others' lives. The Beetle is just the start." She closed the journal, feeling her father's dream merge with her own. Using her father's journal as a guide, she revamped the Value Project, creating programs that not only focused on self-worth but also emphasized community support. She began hosting annual events where people shared their stories of resilience and triumph. At each event, she displayed the small piece of the Beetle's emblem, its chipped edges a reminder of life's imperfections. "It's not perfect," she'd say, "but neither are we. And yet, we're enough." The events became a sanctuary for the broken-hearted and the hopeful alike. As the years passed, the daughter became a beacon of hope for countless individuals. Her story reached international platforms, earning her recognition and invitations to speak worldwide. Yet, she remained humble, always crediting her father and grandfather for the lessons they had passed down. During one such speech, she paused and held up the emblem, saying, "This isn't just a piece of metal. It's proof that even from ashes, we can rebuild something extraordinary." The audience erupted in applause, many moved to tears by her unwavering spirit. Amid her growing success, another challenge loomed. She was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, one that threatened her mobility and energy. The news was devastating, especially as she faced the possibility of stepping back from the work she loved. But instead of succumbing to despair, she used her illness as a new chapter in her story. "Even when our bodies fail us, our spirits can soar," she told her team. Her determination inspired those around her, proving that strength wasn't the absence of struggle but the courage to face it head-on. During her treatments, she returned to the wooden replica of the Beetle her father had built with her. Sitting beside it, she found solace in its familiar shape. She decided to restore it, enlisting the help of friends and volunteers. Together, they repainted it, polished its surfaces, and turned it into a symbol for the Value Project. When it was unveiled at a community event, the crowd erupted in cheers. The replica, though imperfect, stood as a testament to the enduring power of love and resilience. Her health fluctuated, but her spirit never wavered. She began mentoring a group of young leaders to carry on her work. Among them was a teenager who had once been homeless but found hope through the Value Project. "You saw my value when no one else did," he told her. "Now I want to do the same for others." His words filled her with pride, knowing her father's legacy would continue long after she was gone. One day, she received an unexpected message from the man who had restored the original Beetle. He had seen her story in the news and wanted to return the car to her, free of charge. When it arrived, she stood in awe, running her hands over its familiar curves. Though the car had changed hands many times, it still felt like a piece of her family had come home. She decided to keep it as a centerpiece for the Value Project's events. Driving the Beetle again was an emotional experience. She took it to schools, shelters, and hospitals, letting others sit behind the wheel and feel its history. "This car isn't just metal and paint," she'd tell them. "It's proof that no matter how far we fall, we can rise again." People who sat in the Beetle often left with a renewed sense of purpose, their spirits lifted by its story. Her illness progressed, and the time came when she could no longer travel. Yet, even from her home, she continued to inspire others. She wrote a memoir, detailing the journey of the Beetle and the lessons it had taught her. The book became a bestseller, its message resonating with people from all walks of life. Proceeds from the book funded the Value Project, ensuring its work would continue. On her final birthday, surrounded by friends, family, and supporters, she sat in the Beetle one last time. As her daughter, now grown, held her hand, she whispered, "This car carried more than just people. It carried love, hope, and a legacy that will never fade." Her words hung in the air, a powerful reminder of the resilience that defined her life. When she passed away, the world mourned her loss, but her legacy endured. The Beetle became a symbol for the Value Project, displayed in a museum dedicated to her work. Visitors from around the world came to see it, leaving with a deeper understanding of their own worth. Her daughter took up the mantle, leading the Value Project with the same passion and determination. She often shared her mother's story, reminding others that even in the face of tragedy, there is always room for hope. "We are all like this beetle," she'd say. "Weathered, but never without value." The Value Project expanded globally, touching millions of lives. Its programs empowered individuals to rebuild their lives, find their worth, and inspire others. The daughter's vision had become a movement, one that transcended borders and generations. Though tragedy had shaped much of her family's story, it was resilience that defined their legacy. The Beetle, once a simple car, had become a symbol of hope for a world in need. Its journey mirrored the lives it touched, marked by struggle, but filled with purpose. And so, the story continued, not in the pages of a book or the lines of a speech, but in the lives of those who found their strength through its message. For as long as the Beetle stood, so too did the legacy of love, resilience, and the unshakable belief in one's value. Years after her passing, the daughter continued her mother's work, facing challenges that tested her more than she ever thought possible. As she took the reins of the Value Project, she found herself fighting against not only the struggle of running an organization but also an insidious, unseen enemy, racism. People of color often had their worth dismissed, their achievements downplayed, and their dreams questioned. The daughter knew all too well what it was like to be underestimated, to be seen as less than, and she became determined to amplify the voices of those who were overlooked by society. One afternoon, while speaking at a conference about the impact of the Value Project, a prominent philanthropist challenged her, suggesting that the struggles of minorities were simply a matter of a mindset and that people could rise above their circumstances if they worked harder. His words cut deep, evoking memories of all the times she had been told the same thing, not by well-meaning strangers, but by people who held power over her future. She spoke passionately in response, using the Beetle's story as an example. "We are not here to change who we are to fit into someone else's idea of success. We are here to define our own worth." Her message struck a chord with many, but some of the attendees were unsympathetic, dismissing her as angry or emotional. These dismissals were not new to her, but they stung even more now, when the work of the Value Project was thriving and the message of self-worth was gaining traction. As she left the stage, she overheard a conversation among some of the event organizers. "She's just upset because her project didn't get the recognition it deserves," one said. The daughter clenched her fists, refusing to let their ignorance diminish the value of her work. Using her father's journal as a guide, she revamped the Value Project, creating programs that not only focused on self-worth but also emphasized community support. She began hosting annual events where people shared their stories of resilience and triumph. At each event, she displayed the small piece of the Beetle's emblem, its chipped edges a reminder of life's imperfections. "It's not perfect," she'd say, "but neither are we. And yet, we're enough." The events became a sanctuary for the broken-hearted and the hopeful alike. As the years passed, the daughter became a beacon of hope for countless individuals. Her story reached international platforms, earning her recognition and invitations to speak worldwide. Yet, she remained humble, always crediting her father and grandfather for the lessons they had passed down. During one such speech, she paused and held up the emblem, saying, "This isn't just a piece of metal. It's proof that even from ashes, we can rebuild something extraordinary." The audience erupted in applause, many moved to tears by her unwavering spirit. Amid her growing success, another challenge loomed. She was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, one that threatened her mobility and energy. The news was devastating, especially as she faced the possibility of stepping back from the work she loved. But instead of succumbing to despair, she used her illness as a new chapter in her story. "Even when our bodies fail us, our spirits can soar," she told her team. Her determination inspired those around her, proving that strength wasn't the absence of struggle but the courage to face it head-on. During her treatments, she returned to the wooden replica of the Beetle her father had built with her. Sitting beside it, she found solace in its familiar shape. She decided to restore it, enlisting the help of friends and volunteers. Together, they repainted it, polished its surfaces, and turned it into a symbol for the value project. When it was unveiled at a community event, the crowd erupted in cheers. The replica, though imperfect, stood as a testament to the enduring power of love and resilience. Her health fluctuated, but her spirit never wavered. She began mentoring a group of young leaders to carry on her work. Among them was a teenager who had once been homeless but found hope through the value project. "You saw my value when no one else did," he told her. "Now I want to do the same for others." His words filled her with pride, knowing her father's legacy would continue long after she was gone. One day, she received an unexpected message from the man who had restored the original Beetle. He had seen her story in the news and wanted to return the car to her, free of charge. When it arrived, she stood in awe, running her hands over its familiar curves. Though the car had changed hands many times, it still felt like a piece of her family had come home. She decided to keep it as a centerpiece for the Value Project's events. Driving the Beetle again was an emotional experience. She took it to schools, shelters, and hospitals, letting others sit behind the wheel and feel its history. "This car isn't just metal and paint," she'd tell them. "It's proof that no matter how far we fall, we can rise again." People who sat in the Beetle often left with a renewed sense of purpose, their spirits lifted by its story. Her illness progressed, and the time came when she could no longer travel. Yet, even from her home, she continued to inspire others. She wrote a memoir, detailing the journey of the Beetle and the lessons it had taught her. The book became a bestseller, its message resonating with people from all walks of life. Proceeds from the book funded the Value Project, ensuring its work would continue. On her final birthday, surrounded by friends, family, and supporters, she sat in the Beetle one last time. As her daughter, now grown, held her hand, she whispered, "This car carried more than just people. It carried love, hope, and a legacy that will never fade." Her words hung in the air, a powerful reminder of the resilience that defined her life. When she passed away, the world mourned her loss, but her legacy endured. The Beetle became a symbol for the Value Project, displayed in a museum dedicated to her work. Visitors from around the world came to see it, leaving with a deeper understanding of their own worth. Her daughter took up the mantle, leading the Value Project with the same passion and determination. She often shared her mother's story, reminding others that even in the face of tragedy, there is always room for hope. "We are all like this Beetle," she'd say. "Weathered, but never without value." The Value Project expanded globally, touching millions of lives. Its programs empowered individuals to rebuild their lives, find their worth, and inspire others. The daughter's vision had become a movement, one that transcended borders and generations. Though tragedy had shaped much of her family's story, it was resilience that defined their legacy. The Beetle, once a simple car, had become a symbol of hope for a world in need. Its journey mirrored the lives it touched, marked by struggle, but filled with purpose. And so, the story continued, not in the pages of a book or the lines of a speech, but in the lives of those who found their strength through its message. For as long as the Beetle stood, so too did the legacy of love, resilience, and the unshakable belief in one's value. Years after her passing, the daughter continued her mother's work, facing challenges that tested her more than she ever thought possible. As she took the reins of the Value Project, she found herself fighting against not only the struggle of running an organization but also an insidious, unseen enemy, racism. People of color often had their worth dismissed, their achievements downplayed, and their dreams questioned. The daughter knew all too well what it was like to be underestimated, to be seen as less than, and she became determined to amplify the voices of those who were overlooked by society. One afternoon, while speaking at a conference about the impact of the Value Project, a prominent philanthropist challenged her, suggesting that the struggles of minorities were simply a matter of a mindset and that people could rise above their circumstances if they worked harder. His words cut deep, evoking memories of all the times she had been told the same thing, not by well-meaning strangers, but by people who held power over her future. She spoke passionately in response, using the Beatles story as an example. We are not here to change who we are to fit into someone else's idea of success. We are here to define our own worth. Her message struck a chord with many, but some of the attendees were unsympathetic, dismissing her as angry or emotional. These dismissals were not new to her, but they stung even more now, when the work of the Value Project was thriving and the message of self-worth was gaining traction. As she left the stage, she overheard a conversation among some of the event organizers. "She's just upset because her project didn't get the recognition it deserves," one said. The daughter clenched her fists, refusing to let their ignorance diminish the value of her work. Despite the opposition, she pressed on. The Value Project had grown into a global network, but it was still fighting the fight against systemic racism. Many of the people who found their voices through her organization were from marginalized communities, and they often faced backlash when they dared to stand up for their worth. One day, a young man named Tyrone, a former student of the project, called her in tears. He had just been turned down for a job that he was more than qualified for, only to find out that the hiring manager had told his friend, "I don't think we need more people like him here." The daughter's heart broke for Tyrone. She knew that the path to success for him would be a constant uphill battle, one that would require more strength than any person should have to summon. She counseled him, "Don't let this world define your worth. Your value is not in their approval. It's in who you are, who you've always been, and who you will become." Tyrone, a young black man, had faced subtle and overt forms of racism throughout his life, but he now had the tools to navigate it. The message of the Value Project, especially in the face of such adversity, had given him a sense of agency. Over time, the project began to receive letters from people who shared similar experiences of racism. One woman wrote about how she had worked tirelessly to build a career in a predominantly white industry, only to be passed over for promotions in favor of less qualified candidates. Another shared how her academic achievements were overlooked because of the color of her skin. "How do we fight this?" they asked. "How do we make them see us for who we really are?" The daughter, still holding on to her family's legacy, responded, "We fight by showing up. We fight by demanding our space." The project, originally intended to foster a sense of self-worth, had now become a movement for social justice. The daughter knew that for so many, their worth had always been in question, dismissed by society's entrenched prejudices. She worked with advocacy groups, speaking out against systemic racism while still uplifting the voices of those who were targeted. The Beetle became not just a symbol of resilience, but also one of resistance, a reminder that even in a world that tried to diminish them, people could rise. Despite the growing support from those who believed in the Value Project, the daughter faced threats. Hate mail poured in, and anonymous calls were made to the organization, demanding she stop promoting division or identity politics. Each message was a reminder of the prejudice and ignorance that still thrived in the shadows of society. It was exhausting, but every time she wanted to step back, she reminded herself of her mother's legacy, of her family's unwavering belief that value was inherent in every human being, regardless of their background. At a crucial point in the project's development, the daughter was invited to give a keynote speech at a national conference focused on racial justice. She knew that this would be the moment when her message would either be embraced or rejected on a much larger scale. She could feel the weight of the years of struggle, not just her own, but the collective pain of everyone who had ever been overlooked, underestimated, or discarded. Standing before the microphone, she began, "I stand here today not as a survivor, but as a voice for those who can't speak for themselves. I stand here for every person who has ever been told they aren't enough." Her words echoed through the room, her passion igniting a fire in the hearts of those who listened. But there were those in the audience who couldn't or wouldn't see beyond their own biases. After the speech, a man confronted her angrily, accusing her of playing the race card and questioning whether racism was truly as pervasive as she suggested. She stood firm, not backing down but meeting his gaze with calm conviction. "The truth does not change because you refuse to see it," she said. "But that won't stop us from speaking it." As her speech went viral, the backlash was swift and loud. Critics claimed that her focus on race and identity politics was dividing the nation, that she was painting all white people as oppressors. The daughter's inbox filled with hate messages, some calling her a race baiter and others worse. It was a painful reminder of how deep-rooted these issues were. But for every hateful message, there were 100 more of support from people who had been inspired by her words. A mother wrote, "I'm teaching my children the importance of seeing people for who they truly are. Thank you for showing us how." Yet, as the project's reach expanded, the obstacles grew larger. A particularly intense wave of opposition came when the daughter decided to take the Beetle to a predominantly white, affluent neighborhood for a public event. The project had already held events in black and brown communities, but this was the first time they would challenge a space where people of color were not always welcomed. She received death threats, but she pressed on. The day of the event, as she stood beside the Beetle, she addressed the crowd, "This car, this legacy, belongs to all of us. The value in it is the same as the value in every person, regardless of their race." The event, though filled with tension, was also a turning point. People began to speak out, not only against the injustices they faced but also about how they had allowed their worth to be diminished by others. The daughter found herself overwhelmed by the stories shared that day, stories of resilience, of pain, and of hope. This is what it's all about, she thought. We are all worthy, even when others try to tell us we aren't. It was the beginning of a movement that transcended the limits of the conference room and spilled out into the streets. As more voices joined the cause, the daughter began receiving invitations from universities and corporate leaders to discuss racial equity and inclusion. But it was the grassroots movements, those started by people who had felt ignored for so long, that inspired her the most. One group, led by young black women, called themselves the Worth Collective. They wrote, "Your project has shown us that we can no longer wait for the world to recognize our worth. We will create our own space." Amid the victories, there were also tragedies. One evening, the daughter received the news that Tyrone, the young man she had mentored years ago, had been shot by police during a routine stop. He had been unarmed. The grief was unbearable, but it only fueled her resolve to keep fighting. At Tyrone's memorial, she stood before the crowd, holding up the emblem from the Beetle. "This is for you, Tyrone," she said, her voice shaking. "Your worth was never in question, even when they refused to see it." Tyrone's death became a rallying cry. Protests erupted across the country, and the Value Project found itself at the center of a nationwide conversation about systemic racism. The daughter used her platform to honor Tyrone's life and to demand justice, not just for him, but for every person of color who had ever been unjustly treated. "We will not be silenced," she proclaimed. "We will keep speaking our truth, no matter the cost." As the movement gained momentum, the daughter's health began to deteriorate further. The autoimmune disease she had battled for years now had a stronger hold on her, and she knew her time was running out. Yet she found strength in the work she had done, knowing that the legacy of the Value Project would continue. "The work we've started will carry on," she whispered to her closest colleagues. "But it's up to all of you to keep the fight alive." In her final days, the daughter felt at peace. She had fought not just for herself, but for an entire generation of people who were told they didn't matter. Her story was one of struggle, but it was also one of triumph. She had turned the pain of racism and oppression into a beacon of hope, showing the world that no one could ever be truly invisible if they dared to believe in their worth. "The worth of every human being is unbreakable," she said in her last words, "and no one can take that away." The Value Project continued to grow, spreading to corners of the world that had never seen such activism before. Her legacy, intertwined with the story of the Beetle, became a symbol of the power of self-worth in the face of hate. As generations of young leaders took up the cause, the daughter's story remained the foundation of their work, a story of struggle, resilience, and the unshakable belief that, despite the odds, everyone's worth is immeasurable. And in the end, the daughter's greatest triumph wasn't just in the changes she helped create, it was in the lives she touched, the hearts she awakened, and the people who, like her mother before her, saw the value in themselves, no matter what the world tried to tell them. Certainly. Here's the story without the numbers. The aftermath of Tyrone's tragic death left an indelible mark on the world, sparking nationwide protests and increasing calls for justice. The daughter's leadership within the Value Project became a beacon of hope, but the shadow of loss never truly lifted. Yet, it was during this time of mourning that she began to reflect on the greater purpose of her mother's teachings, especially the story of the Volkswagen Beetle. It had always symbolized resilience, but now, it represented something much more profound. The car, like the people we serve, is not defined by its past, she would often say. Its true worth lies in the potential of its future. The daughter became increasingly aware of the parallels between her own fight for justice and the struggle of the Beetle. Just as the car had been dismissed by those who didn't understand its value, so too had people of color been overlooked, devalued, and underestimated by society. Yet, when placed in the right hands, the Beetle was a rare treasure, just as every individual had an untold worth when given the space to shine. Her story was no longer just about fighting back, it was about helping others realize that, like the Beetle, they too could be seen for their value. In the months following Tyrone's death, the Value Project's efforts became more focused. The daughter began organizing national workshops that emphasized the importance of self-worth in marginalized communities. Using the Beetle as a central metaphor, she began speaking not only about systemic racism but also about how individuals, especially those from oppressed backgrounds, could rise above the narrative society had placed on them. She wanted every person to understand that their worth wasn't determined by the opinions of others but by the belief in themselves. Just like this car, your value is priceless when appreciated in the right context, she told them. At one such workshop, a young woman named Elisa approached the daughter, her eyes filled with both gratitude and uncertainty. Elisa had been raised in a predominantly white town, where she had often been the target of subtle racism. She had internalized much of this prejudice, doubting her own abilities and worth. But after hearing the daughter's message, she was determined to change her life. "How do I begin to see myself the way you see me?" Elisa asked, her voice shaky but hopeful. The daughter smiled gently. "Start by recognizing that your story, your worth, cannot be determined by the limitations others place on you. Your value is yours to define." Elisa began her journey of self-discovery with newfound strength. She enrolled in courses on leadership and advocacy and joined the Value Project's outreach programs to help others find their voices. Each day was an uphill battle against her own self-doubt, but she carried the daughter's words with her like a shield. "I am more than what they see," she would remind herself. Slowly, Elisa's confidence grew, and as she shared her story with others, she helped them understand that their true worth was not limited by their background or the color of their skin. As the Value Project expanded its reach, the daughter continued to use the Beetle as a powerful teaching tool. At one event, she had the car restored to its original condition, its faded paint polished to a gleaming shine. She used this transformation as a metaphor for the work the Value Project did, not changing who people were, but helping them rediscover their true potential. "This car, like each of you, was never broken. It was only misunderstood," she explained. "And just like this car, when you recognize your worth, you can shine brighter than ever before." The more the daughter worked to uplift others, the more the critics pushed back. The rhetoric of meritocracy was often used to minimize her message, and the daughter found herself defending the project's core values: self-worth, appreciation, and equality. But with each pushback, she found new resolve. The more they tried to devalue the project, the more it flourished. The critics, whether intentionally or not, only highlighted how deeply ingrained racism still was, and how much work remained. Yet, the daughter refused to let these attacks define her or the project. She knew that the value project was on the right side of history. Years passed, and the value project gained momentum, becoming an influential force in the fight against racism and inequality. The daughter had become a well-respected voice in both grassroots movements and corporate boardrooms, advocating for diversity and inclusion. But with the growing success came a new challenge: the commercialization of the movement. Some of the very people who once criticized her were now eager to align themselves with the cause, capitalizing on the momentum without understanding its core message. The daughter remained vigilant, ensuring that the project's principles never got lost in the noise of corporate interests. Despite her health struggles, the daughter pressed forward. The vision she carried for the value project was no longer just about racial equity. It was about ensuring that every person who had ever been dismissed or marginalized had the opportunity to find their voice. She often reflected on the lessons her mother had instilled in her, the importance of seeing value where others failed to, and the strength in persevering despite the odds. "Your worth is not something to be given," she would tell audiences. "It is something to be recognized. And sometimes, that means recognizing it for yourself first." One day, the daughter found herself sitting beside the restored Beetle, now a symbol of the movement, reflecting on the journey. She thought back to that pivotal moment when her father had gifted her the car. It had seemed like such a simple gesture at the time, but it had laid the foundation for everything that came after. The Beetle, in all its imperfections and history, had shown her the importance of not judging someone, or something, based on external appearances. Its true value was only apparent to those who knew how to appreciate its history and potential. It was the perfect metaphor for her life's work. As she looked around, the daughter saw people of all backgrounds coming together, each sharing their stories and celebrating their worth. The room was filled with the same energy of hope and purpose that had driven her from the beginning. She had taken the lessons of her mother's teachings and the lessons of the Beetle to heart. She had turned tragedy into triumph, oppression into empowerment, and silence into a chorus of voices demanding to be heard. The work of the Value Project would not end with her, it would continue long after, carried forward by all those who had learned to see their own worth. The daughter's final public appearance was at a large rally dedicated to social justice and racial equality. She stood at the podium, the crowd waiting in anticipation. She felt the weight of her journey, of her mother's legacy, Tyrone's death, and the countless others who had found their voice through the project. But she also felt something else, a deep sense of peace. "We have fought for recognition, for value, for respect," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "But today, I stand here to tell you, the world may not always see your worth, but it is up to you to know it. You are priceless." Her words reverberated through the crowd, touching something deep inside those who heard it. The daughter's journey had been long and fraught with pain, but it had also been a testament to the power of self-belief. She had turned a humble Volkswagen Beetle, a car that many had written off as useless, into a symbol of resilience, of understanding, and of the power of appreciation. In the end, it was clear that the true value of anything, whether a car, a person, or a movement, was not in how the world viewed it, but in how it was appreciated by those who understood its true worth. As the rally came to an end, the daughter stood with her colleagues, watching as people of all races, backgrounds, and beliefs came together, united in their commitment to the cause. The Value Project had grown into a movement that spanned the globe, inspiring countless others to embrace their own worth and fight for equality. And through it all, the daughter's message remained clear: we are all worth more than the world tells us we are. It is up to us to remember that, even in the face of adversity. The daughter passed away not long after that final speech, but her legacy lived on in the work of the Value Project. The restored Beetle, now displayed at the organization's headquarters, became a lasting tribute to her vision and her relentless fight for the recognition of human worth. The project's mission continued, impacting generations of individuals who had been taught to see themselves not through the lens of their challenges, but through the lens of their infinite value. And through it all, the lesson of the Volkswagen Beetle endured. True worth lies not in external validation, but in the belief that we are all deserving of love, respect, and recognition. In the years that followed, the movement grew, fueled by the lessons the daughter had imparted. Communities that had once felt invisible now stood tall, proudly embracing their worth. The Volkswagen Beetle, with its history and imperfections, had become more than just a symbol. It had become a testament to the strength of human spirit, to the power of appreciating what the world might overlook. As people gathered to celebrate their worth, they remembered the daughter's words, "You are not defined by what others see in you. You are defined by the value you place in yourself." Please share your thoughts in the comments, hit the subscribe button for more notification on interesting stories like this. Until next time, thank you.